cartoons makes me wish a would drop an anvil on my head and put me out of my misery. Hi, I'm a possum. I find garbage. Today's garbage is cartoons, a shot-on-video horror comedy about a bunch of kids played by stars getting killed by a mad scientist who's supposed to be a cartoon character, but they couldn't animate him, so they just used a guy in a Halloween mask. It's meant to be a parody of old Looney Tunes and Tex Avery cartoons, but the people who made it didn't even understand the concept of a parody, so instead they just have a bunch of unlikable characters get murdered to the soundtrack of old Warner Brothers cartoon sound effects. Watching this movie is like the audio-visual equivalent of hammering a 60-penny nail down the length of your You don't need to experience it to know you won't enjoy it. I mean, this movie really makes me hate being alive, almost as much as YouTube. A lot of low-budget filmmakers seem to think their bad filmmaking can be excused if they make their movies bad on purpose for comedic effect. Which is why so many of them make horror comedies, and end up making movies like Prehistoric Bimbos and Armageddon City, which isn't anywhere near as entertaining as it sounds, by the way. It's easy to make horror movies, and comedies have an excuse to be stupid, so why not make something knowingly terrible? That way, when people say it's bad, you can just say it's bad on purpose and dismiss all criticism. I'm not certain if that was the mentality they went in, with when they made cartoons, but if that is the case, then it's misguided. Everyone is familiar with the phrase, so bad it's good. This describes movies that are so poorly made that they're funny, and a lot of movies get notoriety for their terribleness. But not all bad movies are funny, and movies that are poorly made on purpose are almost never funny. On the contrary, it's miscalculated attempts at seriousness that make terrible movies like Suburban Sasquatch hilarious in unintentional ways. See, even though Suburban Sasquatch is incompetent in just about every way, the writing is just minimally competent enough that we can tell what's happening, and we know that the movie is trying to have these deep, serious themes about man's impact on nature and that sort of thing. But the horrible execution makes it unintentionally hilarious. It's not the sort of thing you can achieve on purpose unless you're some kind of filmmaking genius. And, well, that label doesn't apply to the people responsible for cartoons. So instead of a funny bad movie, we get a boring, confusing, cringe-inducing, obnoxious slog of a pseudo-film. So if you're interested in seeing just how bad a movie can be, but don't want to subject yourself to it, then let me summarize the experience. Cartoon starts off in the cartoon dimension, which consists of live actors' blue screens in front of a drawn background, where a grown man pretending to be a child is getting tortured by our villain, Dr. Carnage. The good doctor tortures him with a prop that was photographed out of focus and poorly composited into the shot. Then he pulls his skeleton out. This is the best scene in the entire movie, by the way. I suggest you pause this video now and get a drink. After the opening credits, during which a theme song that sounds suspiciously similar to the Beetlejuice theme plays, we're introduced to Candy, played by star Lizzie Borden, whose name is spelled wrong in the credits. Candy takes a bath so we can have a gratuitous topless scene, which is weird because I think she's supposed to be a kid based on Miss Borden's performance. She gets dressed and goes outside to say goodbye to her mom, who's played by a man in drag, and her dad, as they leave to go to a friend's wedding. Candy brings in the mail and finds a mysterious DVD labeled Tunes. Candy's sister Cindy, played by star Beverly Lynn, whose name is also spelled wrong, and her friend Amy tell her she's weird to be watching cartoons at her age. You know what's really weird? Making a parody movie about cartoons without knowing how to animate. Candy plays the DVD on her TV in her room and watches a cartoon of Dr. Carnage experimenting on a monkey and creating a killer purple ape named Max Assassin, who proceeds to kill a bunch of other cartoons who are also played by live actors who try and fail to act like cartoon characters. Remember that live-action Inspector Gadget movie? Imagine that, but with production value so low it looks like it was made by high schoolers. Even though this is called cartoons, there's basically no animation in it. What animation there is consists of clip art which just alternates between two frames. Without exaggeration, the animation actually looks worse than that Spider-Man and Elsa cartoon I made a few months ago. Anyway, while that's going on, Cindy and Amy call their boyfriends, Eddie and Rick, and invite them over. These two characters look and act exactly the same, so I'm not going to bother to refer to them by name from this point on. Later that night, the boyfriends come over, and they and the two girls argue over what to do. The boys want to play strip poker, and the girls want to play Ouija, so they invent Strip Ouija, where the Ouija board tells them what to take off. Which just makes me wonder if there's actually a spirit telling these people, who the movie wants us to believe are kids, to take their clothes off. I also like how Ouija is spelled wrong so it doesn't infringe on Hasbro's trademark. Now don't get excited, there's no nudity in this movie aside from the tits at the beginning. I guess you're just gonna have to go to one of the countless gentlemen's websites that exist on the internet which you can access for free after you're done watching this video. Back in Candy's room, Dr. Carnage and Max Assassin escape from the TV and Max Assassin covers Candy's mouth while Dr. Carnage cuts out her spine. In the living room, Cindy hears Candy's muffled screams and goes to check on her, but finds her just staring at the TV. Cindy goes back to rejoin the game, but then the doorbell rings. Thinking it's the pizza delivery boy, Cindy goes to answer the door, but it's just Candy's 32-year-old boyfriend. Candy's boyfriend goes to Candy's room and sees her watching TV. He asks her if she's okay, and she says she's fine, but her mouth is poorly photoshopped really big on every other word. Suddenly, Max Assassin grabs the boyfriend, and Dr. Carnage comes out from behind Candy and pulls his arm out of the hole in her back. He was apparently puppeteering her. Dr. Carnage then grabs a pair of giant plastic scissors and cuts the boyfriend's head off. So Candy is dead now, even though the first third of the movie made it seem like she would be the main character. Then stereotypical Oriental music plays as the Asian delivery boy from Shanghai Pizza arrives. Dr. Carnage answers the door and takes the pizza, which is really small, I guess because it's Asian. Then the actor folds the whole thing over and shoves it into the mouth of the mask in an attempt to make it look like he's eating it, but you can clearly see pieces of it falling to the floor. Dr. Carnage then produces an oversized pizza cutter and kills the delivery boy off-screen. What, they only have to act for 5 minutes or something? Cindy and the gang start to wonder why they haven't gotten their pizza yet, so they try to call the company, but the phone's dead. Then a poorly synthesized drum beat made with the default sounds and a bootleg copy of FL Studio starts to play, and they all turn to see Dr. Carnage and Max Assassin dancing with no coordination. This goes on for a tediously long time. It's at this point that I have to point out the biggest problem with this movie. See, I can't really hold it against them that they had so little to work with. But at the same time, there's a certain common sense things you can't blame on a small budget. Cartoons are known for being extremely lively, with exaggerated expressions and unrealistic motions. There are certain things you can't do with live action, which is the whole reason animation was invented in the first place. So if you want to parody a cartoon, then you need to actually have some kind of animation in your movie, because having cartoon characters played by live actors doesn't make any kind of satirical sense. Even if the movie is going to be live action, the characters are supposed to be cartoons, should actually be cartoons, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit or something like that. If you can't do that, then don't. I mean, if you're a low-budget filmmaker, you should still have the presence of mind to think, I would like to do this, but we can't make it look good with our budget constraints, so we should do something else. You should be able to watch a scene you've shot and say, hey, this goes on for too long and it gets boring, maybe we should cut it down. You should also have the self-awareness to realize, nobody but me and my friends and family are going to think it's funny to see my cousin dance awkwardly in a Halloween mask for 2 tedious minutes. And throwing in annoying cartoon sound effects isn't going to improve it. You should realize that what you're doing is stupid, and not even in a funny way, and you should rethink your life. If your budget doesn't allow you to have what you want in your movie, then you should either not make the movie, or start a crowdfunding campaign. Speaking of which, it's time for a shout out to my $10 tier supporters on Patreon, and some fan art. Charles J. Harris, Dickens, Gage Scar, Jonathan, Lex Reardon, Marcus Mule, Paco, Sean Scholar, Suzuki Halwende, The Great Dane, Tyler M. Wright, Victor Gontar. Alright, now back to the movie. One of the boyfriends starts laughing uncontrollably at Dr. Carnage and Max Assassin's dancing until the veins in his head burst and he pukes up an unidentifiable black wad of stuff. Max Assassin then pulls out a Tommy gun and starts spraying bullets as he waves the gun around, somehow not hitting anybody as they run away screaming. It's kind of a missed opportunity. If the whole point of this movie is to parody old cartoons, they could have had him pull out a giant mallet and smash Eddie's head in or something. Maybe I should direct the next Cartoons movie. How many are there? Oh, Jesus Christ. The remaining adult kids run to the doors, and even though you can clearly see the outside has been digitally replaced with a cartoon swirl effect through the giant windows on the doors, they don't notice until they open the doors and nearly run out into it. That's the sort of thing that happens when the director doesn't think about what the scene will look like when it's finished. The remaining boyfriend gets hypnotized by the swirl, vomits, then passes out. A police officer character from the Cartoons DVD comes out of the TV in Candy's room. Then Cindy and Amy come in. I'm not sure how they got there because that would have required them to go back through the living room and run past Dr. Carnage and Max Assassin to get there, since that's the direction we saw Candy go when she went to Candy's room earlier. It also raises the question of how Dr. Carnage got to the kitchen to kill the pizza guy before the others knew he was there, since he would have had to go through the living room past everybody. You know, it kind of shows a lack of confidence when you assume your audience isn't going to pay enough attention in your movie to notice these things. The cop tells them he's looking for Dr. Carnage and gives them an obviously fake gun that isn't even cartoony, so they could shoot him if they run into him again. Now, in a real movie, you would expect this to be a setup for some kind of payoff, but the gun never gets used, and the movie just kind of forgets about it. The boyfriend who passed out earlier wakes up in a chair in a dark room, and Dr. Carnage cuts open his head and starts tickling his brain and making him laugh. Rockabye Baby starts to play in the background. Which doesn't make any sense, even in the cartoon, because that's the type of song you play when a character falls asleep. This whole thing is supposed to be a parody, but it can't even get that right. The cop goes looking in the kitchen for Dr. Carnage and finds the bloody pizza cutter from earlier, then finds a box of donuts. Not fazed by the murder weapon he just found, he proceeds to eat a donut which has a clearly visible stick of dynamite poking out of it. The explosion also causes Cindy and Amy to get separated somehow, even though they were in a different room. I think the implication is that Amy fell through a hole in the floor which wasn't shown, but there was no indication that they were upstairs, or that this house even has an upstairs. Amy gets found by Max Assassin, who breaks a wine bottle on her head and drags her off. Almost immediately after, Max Assassin also grabs Cindy and carries her away. It happened so fast, they might as well have not even had them get separated and just did it as one scene. Cindy wakes up tied to a chair next to the boyfriend who got his brain poked. She yells at him, but he's too busy doing his impression of the director to notice. Dr. Carnage comes out from behind a curtain wearing a top hat and holding a magic wand. He waves the wand around his hat, then reaches in and pulls out a brain, which he puts in the hand of the lobotomized boyfriend. Max Assassin then wheels out Amy in a box, which Dr. Carnage cuts in half with an oversized saw. Then he plays with her guts. So why is Dr. Carnage, a mad scientist, doing magic tricks? They couldn't even commit to his character. Cindy is then somehow transported to the cartoon dimension where she meets the devil. The devil explains his plan to make more Terratoons DVDs to distribute all over the world. Cindy then realizes anything is possible in the cartoon dimension and decides to become a superhero with a cheap costume consisting of a pink tank top, a pink cape, a pair of pink horn-rimmed glasses, and a pink wig reminiscent of the girl from Lazy Town. She looks like the type of slapdash character a school teacher would come up with to teach kindergarten kids to chew their food. Cindy threatens to beat up the devil, but he disappears. Cindy then somehow escapes back into the real world, still in her superhero costume, and flies around with a terrible special effect until she finds the evil DVD machine. But before she can destroy it, Max Assassin attacks her, and Cindy snaps his neck and smashes his head. Then Dr. Carnage grabs her from behind and chokes her, then picks up a giant axe and tries to hit her with it, but she catches the blade between her hands ninja style and pushes the blunt side of the axe into Dr. Carnage's face, making him stumble backwards. She then grabs one of the DVDs and throws it into his mouth, stopping him long enough for her to pick up the axe and chop his head in half. Cartoon bugs erupt from his head and he dies. Cindy then smashes up the DVD machine with a crowbar. Then Cindy's parents come home, arguing about how the dad got drunk at the wedding and fell on the cake. They then go into the house and see all the messes all messed up. Then they go into Candy's room, where they see the lobotomized boyfriend banging his head against the wall, and Cindy, still in her superhero costume, clutching Candy's body and laughing with insanity. Meanwhile, the kid next door, who's played by an actual kid, goes to get the mail and finds a Tunes DVD. He excitedly runs back into the house, and Dr. Carnage's obnoxious high-pitched laugh, which I forgot to tell you about, plays as the movie fades to black. We then get several minutes of outtakes to pad out the runtime, since the movie without credits is only 72 minutes long.
Oh my god, Rick! I mean, Eddie! Eddie!
So that's Tunes. I didn't write an ending. I didn't finish my script. Support me on Patreon, because money. YouTube took my money away. I'm falling into a spiral of depression. God.